So how many of you remember that roll-in? Anybody here remember that? Anybody here remember that? We did that 5 years ago. We did a series called Once Upon a Time, right when I first got here, and that was our roll-in for that series. And we decided, let's take some time now and do Once Upon a Time 2. And we're going to give you more stories from the Bible that you should know. So I'm really excited about these next. I can't remember how many weeks it's going to be, but it's going to be a good time. Hope you'll be here for all of them. Now, I don't know why I did it, but today's message, it being Mother's Day, I don't know why I chose the title, I Swear. I don't know why I did that. I'm still trying to figure that out because, well, let me just ask you, moms that are here, are you a swearing mom? I just wonder about that. I'm not asking you if you ever felt like swearing. Those times in the middle of the night or sometime when you had to dig that Lego out of your heel, or maybe you were like baking and frosting 24 cupcakes at 1 a.m. for the class party in the morning. You might have felt like swearing, or when you were trying to figure out third grade math, maybe you felt like it. I don't know. Well, let me just tell you a story, a true story in my life. When I was coming along, I think it was in about the 7th grade, somewhere along there. Boys, the guys in the neighborhood, we were playing football in the front yard of our house in Dublin. And my sister Margaret Ann was out there watching us play. And there was one time when the ball went over towards the bushes, and Margaret Ann grabbed the ball and she ran around the back of the house. She wanted to steal the ball and not let us play football. And I started chasing her. And I was on her heels, and I was hollering, "You better give me that ball back." And she just, nah, and she's running. And so I finally said to her, I said, "You better give me that ball back, you." I said a curse word. I swore at her. And I was like, she didn't stop. It didn't have any effect on her. She kept running. But she ran right inside, and guess what she did? She told my mother what had happened. And so my mother said, she did the usual thing that moms do in that situation. She says, "Wait till your dad gets home, and he's going to," anybody know what follows there? Wear you out. He's going to wear, anybody get worn out when they're coming along? Anybody? So Dad comes home, and Dad hears that I have cursed at my sister, called her a bad name, a cuss word. And he says, "Come back here." And I knew what was coming because I knew I shouldn't have done that, but I was, upset at the time. So he takes me back into his bedroom, and he says, "So I understand you said a cuss word today. You said blank," and he repeated it. And I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "Where did you learn that?" And I said, "Well, the other day when we were driving home, Mother was driving, and this car pulled out in front of her, and she said blah, blah, blah." And he says, "Dot." And I thought, this is going to be good. He's fixing to wear her out. I was ready. I was like, "Go, Daddy, go get her." That didn't happen, but I got my due, out of it. It's like, I swear. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know a lot of moms that are swearing moms. I know a lot of moms that are good praying moms. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to dig into a story today about Hannah in the Old Testament. She knew how to swear, but she also knew how to pray. And they may have been the same thing. So I want us to dig into that. But when it comes to moms praying, here's what I know about you moms. I mean, my mother, she had to be a praying woman. She had 6 kids, right? And aside from that one little slip up, I'm pretty sure she was often praying for us. Some of you have prayed prayers, long prayers. You've prayed them over and over again. Some moms have prayed for their prodigal to come home. Some of you have prayed earnestly, cried out before God that your child would return to Christ. Just bring them back to you, Lord. You've prayed for your children's deliverance from addictions or from bad relationships. There are all kinds of prayers that you pray. But there's no greater prayer than the prayer you have prayed. I pray that you have prayed this for your child to come to know Christ and to commit their life to him and follow him, be obedient to him all the days of their life. What a great prayer. It doesn't matter whether you're a mom or a dad or a friend. We all should pray that for those that we have in our lives. The prayers of a mother for her child. Hannah knew how to pray. And let me give you a little of the backstory before we get into the scripture. Hannah was married to a man. He was a godly man. His name was Elkanah. And Elkanah had another wife. Her name was Peninnah. Now, Peninnah was able to have children, and she had several children with Elkanah. Poor Hannah couldn't have children, and that deeply troubled her. Now let me just, a little aside. Polygamy in the Bible where you have multiple wives. It was a fact of life in the ancient world. But here's what you'll discover if you look at the Bible. The Bible never paints polygamy in a favorable light. Every time you see a situation where a man had more than one wife, here's what you find. Here's what you find. There's always strife and conflict characterizing those relationships. And you see that here in the story of Hannah. Here's what you find. Peninnah was able to have children, and she would taunt Hannah because Hannah couldn't. She would make fun of her and just humiliate her. And it affected Hannah so greatly that Hannah was depressed and not able to eat. I mean, Hannah really struggled with this, and I get that. Some of us have been there. You know our story, and you know that we went through that too. And so because of the conflict between Hannah and Peninnah, Hannah struggled. Now, Elkanah, her husband, really felt sorry for Hannah, and he gave her more of what he had. For instance, there was a time when they would go to the tabernacle in Shiloh, and all the family would go, and they'd go there to make their sacrifice to God. And when they got there, they would have a big ceremonial meal. And every time they came to this meal, Elkanah, who loved Hannah and understood her heartache, he would give her a double portion of some of the best meat. But you know what? Hannah was so distraught that she couldn't eat it. And so this is kind of where we pick up the story here. Hannah's at the house of the Lord with a blessed double portion in front of her, and she couldn't eat it. Why? Because she couldn't be a mom. So we're going to read this story with the filter, the idea. Here's the question. What do you do when your dream is delayed? Okay? So Hannah went to the Lord, and Eli, the priest, was there as she came to him. So we're going to read this. I've broken it up into men and women reading the different parts. So if you'll stand with me, you'll be prompted on the screen. Just so follow along as you're kind of led there on the screen. So men, let's lead us off, if you would. Help me with this. Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord, and she made this vow. Women, if you'll read. Okay, men. As she was praying to the Lord, Eli watched her, seeing her lips moving, but hearing no sound. He thought she had been drinking. Must you come in here drunk? He demanded. Throw away your wine. And ladies? Okay, men. In that case, Eli said, go in peace. May the God of Israel grant the request you have asked of him. And women, finish it up.
Oh, thank you, sir, she exclaimed. Then she went back and began to eat again, and she was no longer sad.
Yeah, good job. This is the word of God. It's for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Would you be seated? So you got some fill in the blanks there from this scripture. I want you to go back and fill that in. 1 Samuel 1:11 says this, and Hannah made this vow. Here's where the swearing comes in. You're wondering, how's he got swearing in here? There's where it comes from. She swore an oath. She made a vow to the Lord. She says, if you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I'm going to give him back to you. He will be yours for his entire lifetime. What an incredible moment. For Hannah to do that and to make that prayer before the Lord. So we're not exactly sure how long Hannah had been crying out to the Lord. Here's what we know. The Jewish midrash, which is, it's kind of it's not the Bible, but it's kind of the teaching of the Jewish leaders throughout time that kind of says, hey, the best idea we have about how long she was doing that was 19 years she had been barren and crying out to the Lord. That's a long time. I mean, when Debbie and I went through that, it was 7 years. And I can tell you how much heartache that was for us. But did you know that Hannah, she is the fourth woman in the Bible who suffered with infertility, who struggled with it. She was the fourth woman. There are a lot of women in the Bible that have had that struggle. You know, it's really hard when dreams that we have been delayed. And the question is, what do you do when you find yourself there? So just a couple of thoughts here this morning. Here's the first one we see from Hannah. Here's what she did. She kept crying out to the Lord. She continued to cry out to the Lord, I suppose, for that whole 19 years. And here's what we know, too. Hannah was in a hard place, a really hard place, harassed by Peninnah, embarrassed, worn out from groaning before the Lord, crying out before the Lord. So much so that here they are at this, what should be a moment of great celebration, where they have this big feast, and she's given a double portion. She can't even eat. She's depressed. She's hurting. And it must have been terrible, because she wanted to be a mom. Some of you may know what that feels like too. And here's the thing. When you want something, or you're thinking about something all the time, I wonder if you have this, you only tend to see that very thing around you. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, I can remember when David and I were going through that, it was like all of our dear friends, sweet friends, loving them to death. I mean, they were having babies left and right, and here we were struggling. And we're like, oh, we're so happy for them, but so hard for us. And it's like, that's all you can see. It's all you can think about. I'm sure Hannah had to be there, fixated on what we don't have at times. And it shapes how you live in the moment. The anguish can be more than we can bear at times. I think Hannah was there. But here's what I want you to know too. If you believe that God's only interested in the positive moments of your faith, then you and I have a lot to learn about God's heart for us. He's interested in far more than just those mountaintop experiences that we have. Because here's what we know in our faith. If you've been around long at all, you know this. Faith can be a wrestle. Sometimes it's hard. Waiting for promises to be fulfilled can be a difficult journey for us at times. We know that. We see it in the Bible too. In Psalm 6, King David knew this anguish of waiting for the dreams that he had to be fulfilled. And he writes about that in Psalm 6. Here's what he says. Verse 6, I am worn out from sobbing. All night I flood my bed with weeping. Yeah, just drenching. Have you ever drenched your pillow with tears? Have you ever done that? I mean, he knew that anguish. He saw a dream, but it just was delayed in coming. How long, O Lord, he would say, how long must I wait? Here's what we need to know. God rejoices in your positive moments of faith. He does. When you are celebrating, I wish I'd been there at 8:55 this morning. We did a baptism of little Blakely Cowart. And I asked the crowd after we baptized her to clap. And she's just an infant. And so the crowd started clapping. You know what? Little Blakely started clapping. Isn't that so cool? And it's like the Lord of all heaven's armies is clapping in our moments of celebration, our positive moments of faith. But here's the part that's more important, if you ask me. It's this part. He's especially close in the challenging ones. When we're struggling and we're trying to figure it out, and we go through seasons, 19 years, 7 years, 1 year. Sometimes it's one day, and it's too long. He's close, especially close. You see, Hannah lived in the land of hope deferred. It hadn't happened yet, but she still believed. She believed that God could fulfill her dream. And that's important. That's important. So she kept crying out. Even though she didn't know the future, she didn't know whether God would actually answer her prayer and she would be able to have children or not. She still went to the house of the Lord to pray. She still did. And we need to also. While everything within you is shouting, why God, you can still partner with God in prayer. And God heard Hannah's whispered prayer, her silent, voiceless prayer. He heard it, and he would answer it. So what do you do when the dream's delayed? You keep crying out, just as Hannah did. But here's the other thing Hannah did. In her vow, in her swearing, she committed her future to the Lord. That's important. She said, Lord, if you'll give this to me down the road, then here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give him to you. Hannah believed that only God could open her womb and give her a child. And so she makes this vow to God. She committed her future and that of her future child to God before she ever held that child in her arms. That's really impressive. And she did this not knowing if she'd ever have a child, how God would respond to that. So here's the thought that I take away from that. Can we, like Hannah, can we find fulfillment in God before the dream is fulfilled? In other words, is our fulfillment in him regardless of whether he answers our prayers or our dreams? If it's not, then we're in the wrong place. We need to have our fulfillment in him even before he grants us our dreams. So now here's what I don't want you to think. I don't want you to think that Hannah's story is about bargaining with God. That's not at all what it's about. Bargaining is where you make a promise to God and somehow God's obligated to then give you what you desire. That just doesn't happen, friends. I tried that. I mean, you know our story. For 7 years, Debbie and I couldn't have children, and we prayed and we prayed. And I promise you, I bargained, I begged. I just wanted to be a dad. She wanted to be a mom. And it was hard. And I made all kinds of promises to God. And God didn't say, oh, great, since you made that promise, guess what? I'm going to give you a child. It didn't happen. Just out of the blue, one day, 7 years down the road, we found out Debbie was pregnant. And that's not the end of the story because I wanted more children. You remember, I came from a family of 6. I don't know why I wanted more kids after being in that family of 6, but I did. But you know what? I tried bargaining even then. It still didn't work. And it's okay. We find our fulfillment in God before he grants our dreams. So I don't want you to think it's about bargaining. Hannah wasn't trying to manipulate God. She was trying to she was asking for his help to fulfill the true desires of her heart, to be a mom. And not knowing the outcome, she still trusted her future to him and the future of her child to him. So after 2 years, she shows up again back in the tabernacle. You know what happens? She brings her child, Samuel. 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. You ever read those 2 books in the Bible? That's who she gave birth to, her first child. She gave birth to other children later. It's Samuel. And so here's what she does. Look in verse 28, 1 Samuel 1:28. Now she comes back and goes to Eli and she says, here he is. I'm giving this child to the Lord. And he will belong to the Lord his whole life. And they worshiped the Lord there. Isn't it good? She gave her child to the Lord and left him there. And they worshiped because God had finally granted her dream. So she trusted the Lord with her future and his future. Here's the third thing that I take away from this story you need to know. It's that when the dream is delayed, we need to be an encourager for others. And in that, we will be encouraged. Here's what I love. Eli spoke an encouraging word to Hannah. Here's what he didn't do. He didn't promise her that God would answer her prayer. He didn't say, okay, God's going to give you your child. He just prays a blessing over her. I pray that God will give you this child. Look what it says in verse 17. We read it. In that case, Eli said, go in peace. May the God of Israel grant the request you have asked of him. And she replied, look what happens. She replied, oh, thank you, sir. Then she went back, and look what happens. A complete change in her life. She began to eat, and she was no longer sad. Just in the idea that it might happen, that maybe God will grant this, she was encouraged because of it. Her struggle wasn't fixed in that instant, but the word that Eli spoke to her gave her hope. And you can speak that same kind of hope into the lives of others around you. You know, Hannah went to church overwhelmed. She went to the tabernacle church, we would say, overwhelmed with pain. And not because she couldn't be a mother, right? And she left with hope, even though she wasn't sure that it was going to happen. So never underestimate the power of an encouraging word. Moms, dads, brothers, sisters, grandmothers, grandfathers, all of you. Never underestimate that. It can give people strength. Watch what the psalmist, the Proverbs tell us in Proverbs 16. It says this, kind words are like honey. They cheer you up and make you feel strong. They give you strength. And that's what happened to Hannah because of what Eli said. So sometimes, this is what I've discovered in my life, sometimes what we need isn't relief from our situation in the moment, but an encouraging reminder of the potential of God. It gives us hope for the future. And then as we go through this, here's what I think Hannah probably did down the road. I think she probably used her experiences with God to encourage others who are struggling. And it's true in your life and my life. Here's what we know. God will use your past to help someone deal with their present, providing hope for their future. And it's true. So you wonder sometimes why you're walking through these delayed dream seasons, and then maybe you come through it and God will use you to help others. So has your dream been delayed? Maybe you've been praying and praying and praying for your child or for a child or for the things that I mentioned earlier. You've been faithful, and maybe your tears have even filled your bed at night, as David said, and yet the dream's still delayed. What do? Well, you go to the Lord over and over again. You do. You trust him with your future, and you encourage others. And so I wonder, maybe today there's somebody here who needs an encouraging word from your pastor. And I want to give you that encouraging word today. I don't know what your prayer is. I don't know what your dream is. But I pray that God will grant you the desires of your heart and that he will bless you from above as you continue to seek him.